If I told you that today's readings are all about freedom, how would you take it? Would you perhaps point out that the first reading shows a man sacrificing his livelihood and leaving his family all because this other man said so? Or maybe point out that Jesus tells people that following him means giving up your property and home, means not even saying goodbye to your family, and maybe claim this doesn't sound like freedom to me. But St. Paul is clear in his letter to the Galatians. For freedom, Christ set us free. Jesus also teaches the truth will set you free, and that he is the truth. So if we want to be reasonable and consistent, there are only two choices. We can say that Jesus takes away our freedom, and that Paul and Jesus must be lying to us. Or we can take the time to see what freedom really means. As Americans, we love the idea of freedom. But what do we mean by that? This is a free country. Gets thrown around a lot, especially after someone says, you can't do that. But if we're honest, we all tend to think that freedom means being able to do whatever we want. We've been taught that our whole lives. It's part of the reason there's so much outrage over Friday's Supreme Court ruling. In many states, people can no longer do what they want, and they feel their freedom is being taken away. Yet if we're faithful, we should also realize that that's not what freedom is. You're free to put diesel in your gasoline car, but then you're not really free to go anywhere. You're free to do what you want with your body, but it will eventually cost you your health and your freedom to do anything. And the more that we flex our freedom to do what we want, the more we realize this means competition with others. If I'm free to take that food that I want, someone else is not free to have that food. This is why St. Paul immediately puts a limit on freedom by reminding us of the golden rule. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the truth is, this actually increases our freedom. It doesn't limit it. How? By rooting us in reality. When you define freedom as the ability to do whatever you want, you will always run into this problem. That's not how reality works. From the very first instant you exist, you are limited. Your entire existence is built on things you did not choose, cannot control, and cannot change. When, where, how you were born, whether you're male or female, your height, eye color, metabolism. Thinking that freedom is doing whatever I want means you are constantly at war. The world is your enemy, so is everyone in it, and even your own body and self. The sad irony is the more that we define freedom this way, the less freedom we have. So what does freedom mean? It is about choice, but the difference is the reason for choosing and what we can choose. It means choosing to accept what's real, what's right, what's good. It means starting with the fact that the world and our existence in it is a given, a gift. There is a foundation I did not choose. But now that I am within that framework, I can choose to participate in it. Like Mary, let it be to me according to your will. I accept, I participate. And within that participation, I have many choices about the way that I live that out. Freedom is the ability to make a commitment to something real. And it's a bit of a paradox. We don't actually use our freedom well until we have given it away. A person who spends their whole life drifting from one impulse to another is not fulfilled and is never considered great. The great figures of history, the saints we know and love, all have this in common. They chose freely to give away their freedom, to commit to something meaningful, Doing this well, however, is something of an art form. Yes, it starts with acknowledging freedom isn't absolute. I have to accept reality. We have to commit to something if we want our freedom to matter. But the next step is committing to the right sort of things. St. Paul writes this letter to the Galatians and talks about freedom because the Galatians are trying to obey the Jewish laws of the Old Testament. They're trying to commit to circumcision and all the little rules and regulations that come from that. This, St. Paul tells us, is the wrong commitment. He says if you are guided by the Spirit, you are not under the law, that old law. At the same time, being guided by the Spirit means we can't just gratify the desires of the flesh. There are still boundaries, limitations, and commitments. Which points us to the heart of freedom as commitment. The Spirit is a person. He is God, with whom we have a relationship. Unlike a bland commitment to a set of rules, the free commitment to the Spirit is personal and dynamic, even though a lot of the externals look the same. The Jewish law and the Holy Spirit both require us to keep the Ten Commandments, but the heart is different. And we see that in Jesus' demands of his would-be disciples. Honoring your father and mother and burying the dead are things God tells us to do. They are requirements both in the old law and in gospel teaching. So why is Jesus saying, let the dead bury their dead? Because Jesus is God. The reason that burying the dead or honoring our parents matter is because of God's design. Made in his image and likeness, the way we treat other people, even the way we treat their dead bodies, affects us. And so doing these things correctly are good rules to follow because they follow God's design. We are using our freedom to become more fully human, fully alive, and fully invested in love when we obey them rightly. But there are moments when love itself, when God himself comes first. And Jesus uses these examples in the gospel to make this point, that freedom is the ability to participate in God's plan to become perfect, holy, and happy, not just to check off a rule. And these rules generally guide us to that holiness and perfection. But there are times when the source of the rule takes precedence and outweighs the rule itself. When the call to evangelize now does not allow you to go back home and catch the funeral. When the call to follow Jesus now does not allow you to make the trip to the town over to say farewell. Because it's time to announce the kingdom. What is freedom? Ultimately, it's the ability to choose to love. Because God is real, that's objectively true. Because he is love, freedom is the ability to choose God. Yes, we choose him in following the laws he gives us, even and perhaps especially when it's difficult and we don't feel like it. But even more than that, we choose him in that spiritual, personal relationship that makes the rule matter in the first place. And like any relationship, it's a commitment. It means saying no to all sorts of other things, sometimes permanently. Wealth, political power, food, alcohol, pleasure, success in sports, comfort, the option to change your mind later on, the ability to pick where you live and what you do. These aren't bad things, but they are not what your freedom is for. If you are unwilling to sacrifice some, or even all of them, when God asks, then you are not free. And that's not really what you want, is it? It's certainly not what Jesus wants. So what will you do about it? Will you hold on to your freedom so tightly that you lose it anyway? Or will you follow? Will you give away your freedom to become truly free?